Always takes a minute for it to load. Okay. Everyone's a Fed. That's our episode title today.
All right.
Welcome to Toxic Airwaves. Today we're going to be talking about BIP 300 and 301.
Which is in keeping with our shitcoin theme, because BIP 300 is for shitcoiners.
Yeah.
Spoiler.
100%. Yeah, it's been an interesting wormhole to get down.
Yeah.
Appreciate you bringing it up.
Sure.
So yeah, let's outline what is BIP 300.
So to be at least slightly fair, I wanted to kind of bring up the actual BIP and read off of there and kind of what they say it's for, and then we can kind of get into why that's bullshit. But anyway, so the one thing I wanted to highlight, so these are the, what they say are the potential key benefits of BIP 300 from the perspective of Paul and crew writing it. Number one, protect Bitcoin from competition from altcoins and spinoffs. Anyway, we can get into more of it later. Number two, protect Bitcoin from hard fork campaigns. Number three, help with review by making it much easier for reviewers to ignore bad ideas. And then number four, provide an avenue for good but confusing ideas to prove their value safely. So the whole idea is, as I understand it, is a mechanism to add what they call drive chains to make it available for people to experiment on and, I don't know, like basically create different altcoins, create different, I don't know, projects. I'm trying to be as fair as possible because I hate BIP 300. So it's kind of hard, but
yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah,
they want to launch 260 or 256 shit coins on Bitcoin
and
as side chains.
The thing, I don't know, the thing that bothers me the most is not so much the technical details and the specifics, but the motivation and the philosophy behind it. Like this idea that Bitcoin's at risk, that there's all this innovation and wonderful stuff happening in altcoin land, and if we don't bring that into Bitcoin, then we're fucked, and Bitcoin gets left behind, and there's just going to be another hard fork, and the network effect splinters. There's all these different arguments that they make, and something we were talking about off air before we started recording was, basically this idea that we're trying to do one thing. We're trying to separate money and state, period. That's it. And so like one analogy that's come up is, the current state of Bitcoin is like having a TV with one channel, and all we're trying to do is add satellite TV so you can have HBO and, whatever other channels you want. And it's like, no, there's one channel that we want, and that's sovereign money resistant to state censorship, period. Like that's what this whole thing's about. If you're about something else, then, have at it. It's a free country, free world, go do what you want. But this idea that we need to bring in all this other stuff and we need to do it through a soft fork to Bitcoin Core. And that's my big contention, is it's being sold as opt-in only, that, if you're on the main chain, what the hell do you care what's going on in a side chain, because you didn't opt into that side chain. So just let them go off and do their own thing, and we'll be over here totally unaffected, and that I think is misguided at best. And I mean, honestly, I think it's very dishonest, because it's not opt-in. It's, it requires a soft fork to Bitcoin Core to be able to enable all this stuff. And I don't know. I think that totally negates the argument that it's opt-in. Like if they were going to go pursue all these experiments just on some sort of side chain that didn't require any soft fork or any involvement from Bitcoin Core, I would, I'd be the first one telling everybody I think it's a stupid idea. But and overall, I wouldn't have an issue with it. So like, well, you're not affecting Bitcoin. You're just wasting time and money on other nonsense. So just none of my business. If you want to do that, go for it. But this idea that we need to change core, soft fork core, and in the process, like really very much denigrate the core developers and the process and the prioritization process and all that, just a couple of the things I think are terrible about it.
Yeah, it seems like, especially from shitcoiners, probably, the remnants of the block size wars, there seems to be a lot of lingering resentment towards the Bitcoin Core developers, which I find very interesting. But yeah, it's interesting that they even need a soft fork to do this, to spin off all these side chains. Like, one of the things I think is disingenuous, and I'm not an expert on any of this stuff, but the guy presenting, BIP 300 at Miami was saying that this is a layer 2, and it's not. It's not a layer 2 because nothing is settled on layer 1 like Lightning. It's entirely, this wild side chain. It's just spinning off 250 potential shit coins off of Bitcoin. Like, they want to recreate Ethereum. They want to recreate Bitcoin Cash. Essentially, they want to do all of these silly things on the side. Bring Monero, bring Zcash. And I know those are kind of contentious topics for some people in the privacy world, but I don't think any of it belongs on Bitcoin. I think it's kind of silly.
And I think, yeah. And the reason I've cooled off a lot, over the last couple of days, but like the initial reason I was so like angry at the BIP 300 and the BIP 300 crowd is just that, like, really, really pumping this narrative that, there's all this wonderful stuff going on off in altcoin land. And, and there's a lot of people that really go so far as to say, if Bitcoin's going to succeed, we need to bring that innovation into Bitcoin. We need to bring all those experiments, all those science experiments, into Bitcoin. And it's like, we need this feature, that feature. We need, this kind of privacy at the base layer. We need this that'll increase transactions %. And it's like all this noise that is not state censorship or state censorship resistant money, that is not money that's separated from the state. That's not, the whole idea is that it's stable and unchanging. And then when you have that kind of sound money, the world and the economy and everything else that you can build on top of that is pretty incredible.
Yeah. I mean, this is a thing that I think a lot of people struggle with Bitcoin, is they don't really understand what Bitcoin is trying to accomplish here of separating money and state. They don't really see the issue with it, and I think that's why we have so many people pile into things like Ethereum and into XRP, which is great. I've grown to appreciate altcoins in a new way because it filters people out of. I mean, if we didn't have Ethereum, this would probably be a lot more contentious debate right now. Everybody would be screeching at the top of their lungs about BIP 300, but it seems like it's just kind of, happening in isolated circles and not being taken very seriously.
And I think it's economic Darwinism too, of that, especially with sound money, but even in a fiat system, I think this is kind of true to some extent. I mean, obviously, Cantillon effect would be a counterexample, but like especially with sound money, capital flows to people who use it properly and understand what's going on, and it flows away from people who do not. And so that's what, any of my friends and family, if they bring up a shitcoin, I'm going to do everything I can, to explain why it's nonsense, to convince them not to waste their money on it. But at the end of the day, if somebody is going to go down that road and make that decision, I don't know. Like, I view that as like economic Darwinism taking its effect, and has very, very real consequences. Like, I don't say that lightly for sure, but it's like if somebody wants to go waste their money, or even worse, waste their time on this other garbage, at the end of the day, there's really nothing I can do to stop it. And, I don't even think the government should exist. So I obviously don't support any kind of regulation of it or anything like that. But
yeah, it makes sense. So let's get into, what the proposer of this BIP, what his risk trade-offs are.
Yeah.
Okay, so
do you have it up on the screen?
I have it
okay,
up, yeah.
Nice.
So the risk trade-off of having no drive chain going on the route that we're currently on is defeat. An altcoin defeats Bitcoin via better tech, marketing, partnerships, etc., and the Bitcoin project fails.
Yeah. And just to be clear, like this graphic, when I first saw this, I thought, oh, this is some bullshit, some shitcoiner made up. But this is like the central argument on drivechain.info, which is the main introductory website that they created for all this kind of stuff to direct people to. And it's just that just profound insecurity about Bitcoin's value proposition. And I would argue like really, really deep misunderstanding of why exactly Bitcoin's important and what we're trying to accomplish here.
Yeah, I think that one's pretty funny, because when we look at the altcoins that are, competing with Bitcoin, they're not very threatening in the slightest. Like I think the only, the way that I see it, I agree with what JW said, in his debate with Paul on this topic, that without Bitcoin's our one chance.
Yeah.
Like we have a one chance against, ending this technocracy, this, future totalitarian state that is, we're essentially preventing what the World Economic Forum says of like, you'll own nothing and be happy. Like Bitcoin is the one thing that we have standing in the way of that. And, to mess around with it and bring all these silly things, like if Bitcoin fails, like Ethereum's not gonna, come to the plate and fix it. And neither are any of the other projects. So I think this is a really dumb argument. Be curious if anybody wants to call in and debate us on that. But okay, so the second trade-off, hijack. Bitcoiners are tricked into adopting a malicious hard fork or soft fork as a result of the Bitcoin project mostly fails.
I mean, I'm almost willing to call BIP 300 a malicious soft fork itself. I mean, it's like the more I look into it, the harder it is to, like, I've heard a number of people describe it, if it were to succeed, as like a near perfect attack, like state attack on Bitcoin. And it's like I said, I'm not quite to the point yet of being willing to co-sign that, but I've definitely talked to people who are, and I do see where they're coming from on that point.
Yeah, I think this comes down to, the idea everybody's a Fed.
Yeah.
And the idea of don't trust, verify, when it comes down to this is like, we shouldn't be, applauding anybody in the space. Like we watched Breedlove just get crucified over the last couple of weeks, dying for our grins. But I think it's incredibly important. But I think, there is a potential of that happening. And that's why the Bitcoin development process is the way it is. It's about low time preference. We're not going to push through these things without scrutinizing it, debating, arguing,
And I think that like anyone who thinks that, we're going to waltz into hyper Bitcoinization without many, many huge, probably physically violent fights, I think is asleep at the wheel. Like the opposition of this, we're not, it barely went over $1 trillion asset. Like it's, the first inning hasn't even started with all this. And, another discussion I was in earlier this week was people talking about the president of El Salvador and, what's at risk for him. And somebody was saying, well, they can't assassinate him. They're going to have to come up with other stuff. I'm like, the fuck are you talking about? Of course they can. They've done a hell of a lot more for a hell of a lot less.
Yep.
And that's absolutely an option on the table. It's like these, like the way I described it is that these people making these decisions have unlimited resources and the moral compass of Charles Manson. These are not like misguided diplomats. These are not like some people that just, they got a couple bad ideas, but they're good people at the end of the day. Like I don't think that's the case at all. Like that's who is directly at risk of losing their power with because Bitcoin essentially destroys their ability to accumulate resources. Like it makes theft through inflation impossible, and it makes theft through taxes extremely difficult.
Yeah, I think giving them the moral compass of Manson is probably too generous.
Yeah,
I would compare it to like Joseph Stalin.
Yeah, he at least had a much lower body count compared to these people.
There might be some people that the Soviet party has been, kind of whitewashed in our history. So I would compare it more to like Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il.
Yeah.
Or Kim Il-sung, or Mao.
Yeah, I would co-sign that. And that's because it's the same, like it's the same mind virus at the end of the day, this like authoritarian, I need to control other people. And that's, I talked a lot I try to avoid, arguing politics at absolutely all costs. I haven't done it in a very long time, thankfully. And it's what I just try to, if somebody does want to argue that kind of stuff, what I try to drill down to is the split is authoritarian or non-authoritarian at the end of the day. Like, are you trying to control me and run my life? If the answer to that is no, then have at it. Whatever views you want to have, like, go for it. It's really none of my business because it's not affecting me as long as you're not trying to control me and run my life. And so, but it's like the people that take it to that level of being actual authoritarians, that's where I get very, very concerned, and my, I don't know, my ears perk up.
Yeah, 100%. Next one, parasitic code. Bitcoin scripts become too expressive, making it difficult to exclude some message types from the blockchain. So is that essentially suggesting that it gets full of spam?
I think that one, if I'm understanding it correctly, is, coming from the perspective, and if this is wrong and somebody knows different, please, jump in and tell me. My understanding on that one is coming from the perspective of drive chains and side chains are going to happen because they're obviously such a fantastic idea. And if we don't do it through a soft fork with BIP 300, then, it's going to be done through all these massively complicated scripts that could have all sorts of unintended side effects, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, I differ from that at the very outset, which is that this stuff is obviously an idea that is obviously part of Bitcoin's future. Like, I don't think that's a given at all. And it's like this, I don't know. It's like the core disagreement is, this idea has been around 2015, I believe, was the kind of the original Blockstream paper on it. And then pretty much everybody that wrote that paper since more or less disavowed the idea. Like they're no longer working on it because of all the trade-offs. But like
they watched Ethereum happen.
Yeah. And it's, I don't know. It's this, I don't know, not to beat a dead horse, but it's like this lusting after altcoin land, like this lusting after the experimentation happening on Ethereum and how amazing and awesome it is, and et cetera. That's what's very concerning to me, is to see, otherwise, Bitcoin maximalists, like people who really get the proposition, don't own shit coins, all that kind of stuff, like really falling for this narrative of, we need to bring this tech innovation onto Bitcoin or else Bitcoin's at risk. And that, I don't know, that I think is an extremely false and dangerous narrative.
Yeah. This one's probably my favorite. Oh, we got Russ.
Oh, nice.
We got Russ in here. And David. Cool.
David who? What does it say?
From Fold.
Nice. Oh, nice. Oh, David. Hey, David.
I don't know how to invite them to talk. Invite to speak. Cool. I invited them both to speak. Cool. I'm sure Russ has some really good things to say about this.
Yeah.
I think my favorite part of the trade-off is, hey, welcome to the call, David. You got any comments on BIP 300?
Or no, not yet. Just I'm just here listening to the toxic airwaves.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
or any thoughts on anything. We are, not terribly picky.
I have no thoughts.
Cool. I think my favorite trade-off of not using the drive chain as suggested by this paper is that Bitcoin becomes a cult, or is a cult. Bitcoiners become overconfident and complacent, leading to a culture of stasis and eventually destruction by a black swan event.
And we have Don Reedy back this week. Don, I totally agree. Says the people pushing BIP 300 most likely have a business incentive to do so. I think that's true for a large majority.
Well, I think this is really interesting because when you get into the BIP, it sounds like the miners would benefit a tremendous amount because they would be collecting fees on all of this stuff.
And they potentially get a significant increase in their power and, you know, influence. And it, like I said, I didn't want to get too much into the weeds, but I do think it's a very, very valid critique of it is that it really, really fucks with the mining incentives, and it really, and then no reason to piggyback on this implementation on Taproot's. Yes, and so that's another one that I've seen come up that I do agree with. It's like they are kind of trying to ride the coattails of Taproot coming online of like, oh, we just did that one. Why don't we throw this one in too? And it's like,
yeah, Russ, you wrote some pretty good stuff today that I was reading. Really appreciate that write-up. You got any comments on this?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, sorry, I just joined, so I didn't catch what you guys were talking about earlier, but I assume you're talking about the drive chain proposal.
Yep.
Yeah, you know, I wrote up a few different things. I didn't actually publish it, but I had started writing together or putting together some ideas. Just, you know, I honestly think that the complexity of it, when it comes down to it, really just isn't. I mean, the benefit isn't worth the complexity and the risk that I see. You know, when you talk about the benefit potentially of drive chains, I think that, you know, it really comes down to the idea that you have a bunch of people who've built altcoins, and they've done that for a lot of different reasons. I think the vast majority of them are just to make money. You know, there's probably a handful that are, you know, honestly trying to do something different, but a lot of them are just kind of tweaks of Bitcoin. And so, you know, the idea is that if we take all of that activity that happens on altcoins, that, you know, all the value that's there is somehow going to come back and rejoin the Bitcoin chain, or it's going to prevent more people from building altcoins. And I just think that's sort of a dubious value proposition, because I think that most people who build altcoins really, you know, again, I don't think that the vast majority of them are trying to do something unique or different. And so, okay, maybe we capture 10% of the altcoin value, you know, recapture that back into Bitcoin. You know, the trade-off for that is basically saying, okay, well, we've got to do another soft work. And then, you know, we have this new sort of escrow process where if a bunch of people go put their coins in this escrow, and then something bad happens while they're off doing, you know, their side chain, the way of securing that is to come back and ask the Bitcoin miners to figure that out and adjudicate it as people are trying to withdraw their money back into Bitcoin. And, you know, I just think that it just creates a lot of complexity and, you know, potential alignment in incentives where, you know, these 5% of the hash power basically agreeing to, you know, letting the sidechain exist. So, you know, it kind of turns into the whole drama of a soft fork and just creating a side chain, creating a drive chain. And so, you know, so there's the political aspect of that can come into play. And then once it exists, then, you know, they've got to somehow basically help keep it secure. And the idea is that, well, if we just do this blind merge mining, miners won't have to care about it. All they got to do is just include a hash in their block header or in the Coinbase transaction, And, that's going to lock the value of the side chain. It's going to basically going to commit the side chain transactions, all the side chain transactions into the Bitcoin blockchain. But, I think what ends up happening is that when people want to start withdrawing coins, basically it's up to the Bitcoin miners to vote on, whether they're going to allow that to happen. And so, you get these same kind of coordination problems and, potential for political kind of manipulating or maneuvering as part of that. And I think it's just, unnecessary complexity for, I think, not much benefit.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the summary of my take on it.
Nice. Yeah, get a round of applause for that.
Yeah, that was a fantastic summary. Thank you.
I mean, it kind of brings up this issue of economic activity for just economic state their sake. This is something that Phil from Simply Bitcoin talks about a lot. I mean, it's like there's no reason to go stand in a circle and just hand $100 bills around the circle and then count that as like a part of GDP. I mean, it's just this really silly thing that it provides no, actual value, in my opinion. And yeah, I mean, it's funny.
Yeah, and I don't know. I have trouble understanding the mindset of being envious of all that other stuff going on. It's like, it's like I talk to people and say, oh, well, DeFi's, this has happened on DeFi and this and that and Sushi Swap and whatever else, and they're like, man, how can we get that onto Bitcoin? I'm like, fuck you want that on? Like, it's like these like, it's more fiat financial games as far as I'm concerned, and it's like these massive distractions. And it's the thing that, like, the kinds of state attacks that concern me are much more so, I don't know, like, to kind of think of it in the frame of Brave New World versus 1984. Brave New World is everybody's drugged and happy and just totally apathetic, and 1984 is the Soviet society. And it's like, I think we're much more at risk of Brave New World type attacks on Bitcoin as opposed to kind of Soviet 1984 hardcore crackdowns. Could we see a self-custody ban? We could. Seems extremely unlikely, but I plan my finances assuming on a self-custody ban at some point, but I do think it's extremely unlikely. And that's, I don't know, I think that's part of what kind of triggered me on BIP 300 overall, as I view it as, either intentionally or not intentionally, some kind of like distraction based, like, to use that analogy, like Brave New World type attack on Bitcoin, as opposed to, it's like everybody's prepared and looking for the 1984 attacks, the U.S. government going Soviet, something like that. And we absolutely need to be concerned about that. But I just think we need a lot more attention put on other kinds of more soft, kind of attacks that take a long time and are a lot less obvious.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. We're arguably in the midst of a state attack right now with the Chinese miners.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, one of the things that Paul suggested, I think that's his name, suggested was that it's embarrassing that we don't have NFTs on Bitcoin yet. I think it's embarrassing that, people are messing. I was talking with a no-coiner friend today, about NFTs and about this whole BIP 300 thing. And he looked at me and was like, oh, everybody knows that NFTs are just the new money laundering, BS that don't really provide any sort of real value. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
That even the no-coiner, but I mean, we're just watching it, like the Financial Action Task Force, with their travel law that they're trying to push through, where you would essentially have to KYC any transaction over $3,000 is pretty wild.
And not adjusted for the massive inflation that we're already experiencing and headed into.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like it's the cash limit on banks, where basically if you have, I think it's 10 grand, if you withdraw more than 10 grand, then there's all kinds of stuff. And if you try to do 7 and then 3, then that's, I forget the term for that, but that's also illegal. And so it's like, oh, 10 grand's pretty high. But it's like that rule came about in the 60s when 10 grand was like, I don't know, 150, 200K, something like that, like the equivalent today. Somebody check my math. That math is wrong, but that's the idea.
Sounds about right.
And it's like, that's these kinds of things is they get them locked in and then they never adjust it for inflation, or they tie it to CPI, which is horseshit. And it's just like, and those are the kinds of like slow long-term attacks where it's like they're slowly ratcheting a wrench. They're not coming in with a hammer right off the bat. And that's the kind of stuff that I personally think we need to do a lot more to be prepared for.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is why it's so incredibly important to self-custody.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is something I think that needs to be one of our primary messages that we put out all the time.
Yeah.
Need to self-custody. Don Reddy says they'll lower it from 10K soon.
I believe it. Yeah.
Well, I don't even know if they'll have to because of where we're potentially going with inflation.
Yeah. It's like lower it to 2K or print 10 trillion, or both. Why not both?
Just knock a couple zeros off.
Yeah. And it's, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, self-custody is just so incredibly important. I mean, there's so many reasons to self-custody. Everybody has way too much counterparty risk that they're assuming with the chaos that we see today, with the travel rules and the restrictions on where you put your money. And they try and set up a system for AI to audit transactions. Transaction history, they don't have the manpower right now.
Yeah.
That's an interesting take.
And I think like self-custody huge. Another thing that really concerns, because I can't remember if I mentioned this last week or not, but it's like at the end of the day, anybody who's, anarchist libertarian inclined is my people, and especially Bitcoiners are my people. And so it's like, that's the people that I care about. And, another big attack vector that I see, which I don't know if we planned on this episode being attack vectors, but I think it's working okay.
Yeah, it's turning into it.
But is people using leverage on their Bitcoin, and like, oh, I'm levering up to buy more. My, we're sitting at 30 whatever today. My liquidation is only like 15K. It's not a big risk. Blah, blah. I hear this stuff all the time, and my personal view is that leverage on Bitcoin is going to be like a big, huge, long, drawn out Mount Gox over the next few years. That's just going to fuck a lot of Bitcoiners. And I think a lot of people are going to get to the end of this decade with a lot less Bitcoin than they had planned on, because they were playing these leverage games as opposed to leaving it in cold storage and, and whatever else. And I think like a big reason for that, and this is what I always try to tell people, is like, okay, you're levered, you think it's a safe percent of your stack, 20%, 30%, whatever that number is for you. And you wake up to a 6102 headline and price is down below 10K or whatever that does. And it's like, you just got liquidated on a huge percent of your stack. And now, someday you have to explain to your grandkids why, it's why you pissed away the, potentially the opportunity of several lifetimes. And that, I don't touch leverage. I don't touch trading. I don't touch any of that stuff. And, maybe there's people out there that are geniuses with all that, and, they'll get to just absolute freedom, a cycle ahead of me. I'm okay with that. I'm good with that risk. If I'm a little bit later than them because I just parked it in cold storage, then that's all right with me. But I don't think that's the case. I think most of them are going to get wrecked like Breedlove did.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to have an adversarial mindset about things.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think that there's been a lot of talk about the potential for 6102 in Bitcoin and how unrealistic it is. And, I hope it is, but I think it's important to act as if it is a possibility, mm-hmm. and even a probability, because I mean, you just look at how much Bitcoin's on exchanges right now.
Yeah. And
I mean, Saylor's got all of his Bitcoin stashed over at Coinbase or wherever. All the stuff that you put into BlockFi is custodied with Gemini. It's a huge honeypot, for these, for the governments to go and just, steal. And I think if that happened, it would be catastrophic.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people come at things like this from the perspective of, what are the odds this could happen, which I think is a totally wrong perspective. Like when I don't give security advice or anything like that, but the one thing I'm comfortable with saying is that Bitcoin transactions should be done on a single purpose machine, a Linux machine. It's like a person using a daily driver Windows laptop with a hardware wallet is just an astronomically terrible idea, in my opinion. And so it's like beyond that, go look up the debates with people way, way smarter than me and, make up your own mind. But it's like, that's one thing. And it's like, I was in Miami, I was having that discussion. They're like, you want me to spend $100 on a computer and learn how to install Linux and all this? I mean, it's like, is this or is this not a generational fortune? Like, is this or is this not a once in many lifetimes opportunity? Like, is this our best shot ever to end the state once and for all? Like, yes. And so it's like, yeah, that's going to take an investment of time and resources. Like that's to do properly. It's like the number of people who acquire and secure a generational fortune across decades statistically is zero. And there's a reason for that, because it's extremely difficult. And it's, like Bitcoin gives us huge, huge, massive advantages in that arena, but it does not make it a layup by any means.
Yeah, it comes down to, for me, is like, what future do I want to leave future generations? Mm-hmm. And if we look at the trajectory we are on, especially without Bitcoin, it is awful. It's just an awful future. And it's not just like isolated to a couple countries like we, have traditionally seen. It is global, because this monetary system is global. It's just this awful, hydra that exists and reaches everywhere. And yeah, it's the only way to attack it is to opt out, essentially.
Yeah. And that like that idea that technology is what guarantees rights. Like Bitcoin is what guarantees property rights, not, laws and papers and stuff that old corrupt people say and write.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, we can't trust these people, that run the exchanges. So Brian Armstrong is a perfect example of somebody that is just awful in the Bitcoin space, with his attacks on Bitcoin with SegWit2x, and was he what was it called, Bitcoin XT or whatever? Was he part of that?
I don't know. I know Jameson Lopp was a Bitcoin XT guy. Brian Armstrong, I don't know for sure. I mean, not that we need more reasons to hate Brian Armstrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he just endorsed Charles Hoskinson, and I've been diving into a bit about Charles and Cardano, because that was a shitcoin that I got sucked into when I first got in. And, they're partnering with the Ethiopian government, which has just committed crimes against humanity, to create essentially a social, identity system, that could very easily be merged into social credits system. I mean, like, one of the things that Charles said, that there's, an interesting clip that I have, maybe I'll play it sometime on this, but, he says they need the system to decide whether somebody is worthy or not, in society, for a job. And I think that's insane.
Yeah.
Based on all of their data that they've collected on them, throughout their lives. And if that's not social credit, I don't know what is. So if anybody argues against it, but yeah. Okay.
And I do think it goes back to that authoritarian or non-authoritarian divide. It's like, that's, I don't know, in my mind, that's the single most meaningful, way to divide people. Like, not all this nonsense around culture, religion, any of that kind of stuff. Like, the divide is authoritarian or not authoritarian. Like, there's, wonderful people from every single group of people that are non-authoritarians, and there's terrible people from every single group of people that are authoritarians. And it's like, I don't know, I just think that's the meaningful divide.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. I mean, it's like, Charles will suck people in, and there was a person at my meetup I was explaining to this a couple weeks ago about the social credit system that they're building in Ethiopia, but he'll suck you in by this, presenting this idea of giving financial services to people that are unbanked, and really proactively doing that, and training people to be developers in emerging markets like Ethiopia. and doing all these things. But I mean, it's kind of like you have to go back. I had Alex Gladstein on my podcast one time, and we were talking about, you know, the Soviets and how they were suggesting that healthcare is a human right, and kind of the origin of that, of like, oh, we kill millions of people, but at least, you know, everybody has healthcare. And I think that's what it comes down to, you know, in this argument is like, sure, you give all these people, you know, a financial identity, you know, so that they can start, you know, essentially accessing banking services, but they're not free. You know, if you're censoring everything and you're controlling their behaviors and not allowing them to make decisions of their own volition, you know, and taking this to next level coercion, it's awful, it's evil, you know, and that's the, you know, these guys, and these are the people, you know, when you leave your money on exchange. I mean, not all of them are that bad, but you have to assume that they're that bad. Even like exchanges that, you know, we like, you know, that have real Bitcoiners, like they're subject to these awful, evil people, you know?
Yeah. I mean, they're probably not gonna, you know, go into a cage to defend your Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And it's just an observation. It's not a critique. I don't think they have any obligation to, you know.
They don't have nukes and F-15s to protect themselves from Joe Biden. So
yeah.
Okay.
Should we do Don's question?
Let's do Don's question. Thanks for the questions, Don. What do you guys think about difficulty dropping another 11%?
It seems mining's outside my wheelhouse. With the most recent one, I believe, is 27% drop, which is pretty significant, biggest downward difficulty adjustment in history. And then, you know, like I said, yeah, like as Don's saying, they're projecting another 11%. So the obvious observation is hash rates leaving the network. I don't have a lot of terribly informed or relevant opinions on why exactly that is.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of thoughts on it either, but I mean, it seems like with this giant drop in hash rate, I mean, the only thing that really happened was that blocks took a little bit longer to come in, you know, until the difficulty adjustment happened. So, I mean, it's a pretty robust network, and I have a lot of faith in it right now, but even still, you know, it is definitely, you know, something that's really interesting to be watching, you know, and concerned about.
And Don, are you on Spaces? Do you want to jump in and share any thoughts on it?
Do you think yes, absolutely. I think miners are leaving China.
It appears so.
Yeah. I think Matt Odell and Marty Bennett had a great conversation about this the other day on Tales from the Crypt, but yes. We just went through and they had a group of us buying a bunch of miners that are on the market right now. So I think you can see it, like the miners are dropping in price all over the place because they're, you know, selling them.
Well, and it's like the number I've heard from miners is if you can get below $40 a terahash, that's a screaming good deal. And what he was mentioning, you know, these were S9s. So the S9s bought for 300, you know, I did the math, 13.5 terahashes for 300. That comes out to about $22 is what these S9s were going. Granted, these are very old, you know, several generations back, but, you know, roughly half that $40 a terahash number.
Southwest Hodl, do you have any comments? All right. Jump in if you want to. Yeah, I mean, the world of mining is pretty interesting. That's definitely a rabbit hole I haven't gone down enough. I need to get into quite a bit more.
I think we're way too comfortable with this idea that hash rate's going to leave China, though. Just as a community, we're far too okay with this idea. There's an article from 2011, a Forbes article titled "Friends Don't Let Friends Become Billionaires," and it was about how China kills billionaires. We just saw them disappear, Jack Ma. They just thwarted the IPO of Didi. China, I don't think that hash rate's going to leave China because China can't have rich crypto anarchists. I think that hash rate gets stopped at the border when they try to move it out.
Yeah, that's a definite possibility.
And that would be a huge indicator of it being a state-sponsored attack. Because if we start seeing confiscations and things like that at scale for
Well,
sure.
We might not even know because like we're anticipating all the hash rate to come back online. Well, if China confiscates 80% of it, and then they let out 20% who are state allies, and the state allies go around saying like, yeah, we all left, we all made it out, and we're all picking up operations. Well, that hash rate could come back online in China. The Chinese state could run these miners, and that's in line with the game theory that you control the hash rate, but you prevent your citizens from using it. So, I mean, we could see the hash rate come back online, and it still might be in China. We just don't know. And I think we're just way too okay with this idea that it's just all going to come to Texas. I think that's a bad narrative.
Yeah,
I would agree with that. I think those are great points.
I mean, I really don't want to see all the hash rate to go to Texas.
Yeah.
I think seeing it in Eastern European countries, places like Kazakhstan, Mongolia, distributed all over the place is something that gets me excited. But yeah, I mean, we can't trust anything that comes out of China as well. It's really hard to get accurate information from them.
Yeah.
So 100% agree with that.
And if something somehow does,
yeah, that's the other thing. So you
cut out for a second, Southwest. Yeah, this is an interesting topic to get into.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. Even Mr. Wonderful was pushing the Texas hash rate narrative. Yeah.
Gosh, that guy drives me nuts.
Yeah, seeing him get booed so in Miami, there was a live recording of TFTC, and Kevin O'Leary was walking out, and a bunch of people started booing him and telling him to get fucked, and it was good.
Well, he went on this really funny thing about, wanting clean blocks.
Yeah. And it's stuff like that. It's like it would be funny if, so many boomers didn't fall for that, because I mean, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin's not like, I mined this physical coin with, I don't know, unicorns and solar panels or whatever, and then I'm giving it to you so that that physical amount of Bitcoin was mined with, unicorn farts and solar panels and whatever else. And it's like no, it tracks balances. It doesn't track individual. I don't know. Anyway, it's not even worth too much time on why he's retarded. But
I'd love to see Bitcoin Tina and Kevin O'Leary in the same room going at it,
yelling at each other.
I'm a fan of Tina. Yeah, man, that guy, Shark Tank, the whole crew, they're just a bunch of shitcoiners.
Well, and Mark Cuban, for the longest time, sold himself as a libertarian, and now he's, he gets rug pulled once on some DeFi bullshit, and he's trying to get the SEC and everybody to come in and regulate it. And I mean, on top of that, just supporting outright socialists for a very long time also. But yeah, Mark Cuban's I never had a super high opinion of him, but he's been pretty disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the topic of stable coins, it is definitely something that isn't talked about a lot. Like people were talking about Tether, they call it the Tether FUD, where, wondering if there was actual backing 1-to-1, which I think it's close to that. It might be like 7-to-1, but if all of that money is sitting in a bank account on top of fractional reserve banking, that makes it a lot more fragile. So I think this is something that people need to be concerned about if they're using stable coins on a regular basis, which is, I think, a lot less used in the US and a lot more in places like China and Russia.
Yeah, they need those synthetic dollars.
Yeah, to get in and out of Bitcoin and shit coins. Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of on the BIP, back to BIP 300. How do you see this playing out?
My best guess is it continues to go nowhere like it has for the last 4 or 5 years, because most people can see how dumb of an idea it is, and that there's tons of complexity. And there was, who was it? Oh, I think it was, Ben the Carman asked a question in that
was a good
conversation, debate, whatever, with Paul and JW, basically listed off a whole bunch, and he's, you know, 1,000 times more informed on this than I'll ever be, but listed off several upcoming proposals that were like actual really significant improvements, like things that added a lot of value, that, you know, had, you know, infinitely better trade-offs, like all kinds of stuff. Because it seems like Paul's big critique is like, you know, the process is failing because this obviously wonderful and amazing idea hasn't been prioritized, and it's because, you know, the core developers are corrupt or too busy or, you know, whatever. Like his narrative on that changes pretty frequently. And yeah, it's like no, it hasn't been prioritized because it's a shit idea with garbage trade-offs. That's why. And I hope that it continues to not be prioritized.
Did we go through what they were suggesting for projects on BIP 300?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay.
We should bring that up.
Okay, so
yeah, for all the smooth brain listeners who do not have a technical understanding, please break it down.
Oh, the BIP 300?
Yes, please.
So it's essentially a soft fork to allow, you know, what they call drive chains, which is sidechain. And so there's what they're proposing is like a formal mechanism for people to be able to create essentially altcoins, you know, or different projects, test out different features, all kinds of different stuff. And so the idea is there's all this amazing innovation going on in altcoin land. Like, look at what Ethereum is able to do. Look what Zcash is able to do. Look what Monero is able to do. And like that, you know, in their view, as I understand it, and I'm trying to be fair, is that there's a big attack vector for Bitcoin of missing out on that kind of future innovation and future technology. And like one of the, you know, I think one of the points we were trying to hammer is that Bitcoin is trying to do one thing, which is be, you know, censorship resistant money. You know, it's like we're trying to separate money from the state. We're not, you know, trying to implement DeFi protocols. We're not trying to implement, you know, experimental, all kinds of different stuff. Like there's one thing that we need to do, and it's humanity's single best shot at freedom, and single best shot at, you know, what I think is the ultimate goal, which is eliminating the state once and for all. And so,
So what risks, I guess, like, I get the idea of it, but what risk does it pose to Bitcoin? I just read the block size war, so I consider myself an expert on protocol battles now.
I think the biggest one, as I understand it, is it does fundamentally change miner incentives, and it does create a lot of reasons for them to collude and centralize and gain more power. And then there's, you know, the big thing, and this was pointed out by JW in that debate, is that it does introduce the possibility for miners to get Bitcoin balances, to essentially steal Bitcoin balances, which does not exist today. And the way that they deflect that is they say, well, this, that, and the other. The same thing can happen with Lightning, with whatever. And that, I think, is totally false and disingenuous, because all of those kinds of attacks are related to reorganizing transactions and fucking with that, and, you know, variations of a 51% attack type thing, which has existed from day one and exists today and is, you know, a threat to be evaluated. But this introduces a whole other level of complexity. And I thought Russ did a really good job kind of outlining like a lot of the complexity that it introduces for, you know, what looks like little to no upside. You know, the upside is we get to experiment with shitcoins on Bitcoin. Like one of the common analogies proponents of BIP 300 uses that I've heard is, you know, we have a TV with one channel today, and it's, you know, NBC or CBS or whatever, and BIP 300 would enable us to get satellite TV so we can have HBO and NFL Network and all this other stuff. And it's like, to me, like that's a fundamental misunderstanding of what Bitcoin offers. Like what the value proposition of Bitcoin is that one channel, that we're trying to do one thing, and we're trying to use that to promote human freedom and to end the state. And, you know, it's like, oh, well, we should have HBO, whatever. It's like, no, if you want to have HBO, you know, go buy HBO, go get HBO, do your own thing. Like, I'm not going to stop you, but we're not going to bring it into Bitcoin and bring in all the complexity and issues and fucking with the mining incentives and things like that.
Yeah, all of these miners would be able to mine and earn transaction fees on all of these side chains. which adds, a lot of craziness. But like for some of the proposals, Bitcoin extended, from my understanding, sounds a lot similar to Bitcoin Cash as a sidechain. Are you familiar with what BIP 101 is?
No.
It's probably a rejected BIP. Hive Mind, peer-to-peer Oracle system and digital marketplace. Mimblewimble, forged in the Chamber of Secrets by the Dark Lord himself. This hyper-specialization transaction system is far less programmable than Bitcoin shrinking blockchain. They'd want to put Liquid on it. Rootstock, a re-implementation of Ethereum led by Bitcoin veteran and world-class security researcher Sergio Demian Lerner. So they want to build Ethereum on top of Bitcoin. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and it's one thing you'll see come up a lot as you're reading, and I do encourage people, definitely read the BIP, read this kind of stuff, like read, I don't know, like I had this conversation today that, somebody told me, I was like, well, the reason you hate BIP 300 is because you haven't read enough of Paul's stuff. Like Paul explains it very clearly. And I said, no, that's why I hate BIP 300 is because I've read a bunch of Paul's stuff. Like I've read I'm far from an expert on it by any means, but it's like I've read his, and I had spent very little time on it and then started reading his stuff. And I thought, this is garbage. Like, this is terrible. Where's the support for this coming from? And yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, pretty much all you have to do is go and listen to get a general understanding of what we're talking about, is go and listen to his talk at Miami, Bitcoin 2021, where he says things that, like, it's embarrassing that we don't have NFTs on Bitcoin and we need to bring DeFi to Bitcoin. We need Sushi Swap on Bitcoin.
Yeah. And that, I just think that's the fundamental, what I would characterize as a misunderstanding of why we Bitcoin and why we need Bitcoin.
Well, the thing that cracked me up, if you go and you look at the comments on his talk, I mean, it's got a pretty good ratio of likes to dislikes, but most of the comments are pretty positive, and it reminds me a lot of, if you go to a shitcoiners video, like some XRP Moon Lambo person, and they're all, it's like almost as if they're sock puppets, or they're just brainless.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this kills all the shit coins.
Yeah. And that's the most hilarious. I don't know. That's, I think, probably the most hilarious argument. Like, the people that are selling BIP 300 as a way that we kill shit coins. It's like, no, you're trying to legitimize shit coins.
The way to kill shit coins is kill fiat currencies.
Yeah.
Because then people won't be, even interested in these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that a helpful explanation, Southwest? Done ready, like your HBO comment.
Oh, good deal. And I loved Game of Thrones, so that's not a slight against HBO. It's just not related to censorship-resistant money.
I never watched Game of Thrones.
Anyway.
I feel like we already have HBO.
Oh man, felt like that was going to be a good rant. You cut out Southwest.
I feel like we already have HBO.
Yeah, I agree. Like, HBO, I think, is like one of the better, platforms out there as far as content that they put out.
Yeah.
That we have that. What's like the worst?
There's a very long tail.
Hallmark.
Yeah.
We need to build Hallmark movies onto Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We need some feel-good Christmas stories.
Yeah.
That's what BIP 300, 301 is. Yeah, I mean, it is.
We need 67 iterations of the lady that thought her life was over and then had Prince Charming come in.
My girlfriend was trying to get me to watch some of that. I lost my mind. She likes bad TV. She still has that high time preference in her.
Bravo's the way. I think I think that's fair. Bravo probably is the worst.
I don't even know what Bravo is.
It's like I don't know. It's like shitty reality TV for middle-aged people.
Oh,
Roughly.
yeah, like how MTV is.
It's like all those Celebrity Housewives, all that kind of stuff is on Bravo.
Yeah.
But all right. Oh, should we thank our sponsor?
Yeah.
So we have we mentioned this last week, but we have a wonderful, wonderful sponsor that helps make all this happen. It's Dirtbags Bar in Tucson, Arizona. Shout out to Dirtbags. And yeah, we've just been trying to plug them, get people to go check it out. Maybe we can organize a time to go meet there. And yeah, Dirtbags Bar, the best place in Southern Arizona to meet your future ex-wife.
When I was visiting friends down at U of A, dropped a beer at Dirtbags, and a bouncer looked at me and he just gave me the death stare. And I just pointed at a chick, and then they threw the chick out, and that's my Dirtbag story.
That's a great story.
We picked that sponsor because we're in a Dirtbags Telegram group that's super, super fun. So we thought it would be a good time to have a sponsor by the same name. And we don't have a formal arrangement yet, but we're hoping to sign some kind of one.
I was just gonna ask if that was a real thing.
No,
It will be.
We're working on it. So a lot of people try to become influencers for money, for whatever. Like all we're trying to get is a sponsorship deal with Dirtbags Bar in Tucson. Maybe 1 beer a month, something like that.
I'll take
something formal. Yeah, or a burger.
Yeah, if they give me a burger.
Yeah. But
$6 burgers.
Yeah, no, it's for anyone outside of Arizona, it is a shitty campus bar right by, and I shouldn't be saying this about our sponsor. It's
Yeah, come on, man.
it has an acquired taste. But it's right by it's right by the Greek area. So it's very frequented by, a bunch of 21-year-olds in fraternities and sororities and that kind of crowd. So
yeah, who knows? You can get your future ex-wife kicked out there. Who knows?
Ooh.
yeah.
It's a great place.
Yeah, absolutely.
That girl that got kicked out, did you follow her out and propose?
No, we laughed. My one friend saw everything happen, and he was laughing his ass off. And I was like, "Thank God you saw that. Let's get out of here now." So we went to the other side of the bar.
That's awesome.
I had a friend in college. He used to go to frat parties basically every weekend. Every weekend he would say, "All right, here we go. Going to meet my future ex-wife this weekend." So he I should follow up and see what he's up to. He's divorced yet, but
Yeah, I don't know much about the Tucson bar scene.
Yeah.
I like country swing. a lot.
I know that a couple of years ago there was unfortunately a number of shootings down by the bar scene, so that kind of sucks.
yeah,
Yeah.
I avoid downtown Tucson at night for sure.
Yeah.
Well,
Most places in Tucson at
Yeah.
night aren't the best.
yeah, I tend to keep a senior citizen schedule anyway, so I'm usually in bed early,
Yeah,
like all the cool kids. We're not.
I kind of am too. Yeah, I don't know. I think like the only bars I really spent time at are like the Maverick.
Oh, that's fun.
There's one I went to that was, I think was it Maloney's? It was like 3 different bars in one.
Oh yeah,
One was like a country. Yeah, I like to country swing a lot.
nice.
It's
Maverick's over on the east side, right?
Maverick's
Take a
yeah.
I know where that is.
It's a hilarious place. You like go in, and I'm always the youngest person in there by like 30 years.
Nice.
There might be a couple people my age, but
Grab a couple cougars. Sounds like a good deal.
yeah. My girlfriend enjoys dancing too. I think this is like one of the funniest things that like a lot of guys like refuse to dance.
Yeah, I'm one of them. I'm lame.
Yeah, I'll have to get you out of that. I mean, it's just like you show a lot of confidence in being willing to do something like that. That's why it is funny because I've done some like other forms of swing and then like East Coast, West Coast, and it's really, really difficult. I'm not that good at it because it actually takes like some coordination, and you don't just do like crazy flips and stuff like that like you can in country swing. And you get these like really goofy, nerdy people that probably are trading ETH on the side, dancing with these gorgeous girls. There's something to it. We can all get girlfriends when Bitcoin hits 100 grand, or you can just
Because then we can afford swing dancing lessons.
Just
Yeah, the more Bitcoin you have, the less dancing you have to do, though. So, note to all of your followers.
Wonder if Max Kaiser does any dancing.
Alex Jones claims that Max Kaiser gave him 10,000 Bitcoin back in the day.
Okay, well, yeah, we should go on this one. So Alex Jones. Okay, so here's one conspiracy theory I have with YouTube. If I had a video that we mentioned Alex Jones and it performed really poorly, and I wonder if that was why.
Oh, did I just fuck up our ratings?
It doesn't matter. we got a good crew here. But Alex Jones said that he doesn't like Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is some giant psyop or something.
Yeah, he thinks it was created by one way or another, like created and controlled by them, whoever that is.
By the lizard people.
Whoever's on top of the CIA, NSA, all that stuff. Yeah.
You got any
seems
theory?
Extremely unlikely, but
yeah. I mean, I think it's like conspiracy theories are interesting. Like, I think they're really kind of fun to dive down the rabbit hole and get into. But I also think there's wild ones out there that are really silly, like QAnon and stuff like that.
yeah,
That's another banned word that we're gonna get.
that I think was a psyop for sure.
I think it entirely was.
And anybody in the Dirtbags chat can vouch for this, but I am absolutely a conspiracy aficionado. I mean, just yesterday or the day before, I was trying to tell people about how Charles Manson and Jack Ruby, who cleaned up the Kennedy assassination, he's the one that killed Lee Harvey, that they had the same MK Ultra psychiatrist, Charles Manson and Jack Ruby.
That is true. I was looking into that the other day.
It's
super interesting.
There's, whatever you think about the absolute depravity of the intelligence community and what they're up to, it's the more I look into it, the lower my view gets of them.
What about the conspiracy theory that all of this hash rate is going to leave China and somehow make it to the U.S. or North America?
Yeah, that seems extremely unlikely. That I don't know. I know we were talking about that earlier. That's something I'm trying to learn a lot more about that. I don't have a real strong informed view about, because I know we just had the massive difficulty adjustment. Looks like we got another pretty good sized one coming. Why exactly that is, how much of the hash rate staying in China, not staying in China, that I'm kind of taking a wait and see approach, because I don't have a real good read on what exactly is going on there.
Well, this is something that Matt Odell was talking about. Was essentially he was on the same page as you, Southwest, and Marty was kind of brushing him off.
Yeah, and it's
well, yeah. So I think my analysis of that was that Marty's getting the word of mouth from, like I said, they only need 10% state allies of 20% of hash rate that can be state allies, and then they communicate to the rest of the world like, no, everything's fine. From the jump, though, even without Bitcoin, China hates rich Chinese people. Like, you can't rise above the party, you can't gain power, and then you give them encrypted wealth and the most powerful financial and diplomatic tool in this century, or the political tool. Sorry, I'm sorry. It's like we should assume that the hash rate isn't leaving China until it leaves China.
Yeah, I think that's great.
I think you're making a ton of sense. Yeah.
I mean, this is, I think, the biggest argument for why
you guys.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I feel like nobody's echoing this sentiment in the community, and everybody. I don't know. It's just, it seems like we're really complacent with this. But go ahead.
Yeah, and I think like something we were talking about too a little bit earlier is it's like, everybody's looking for the Soviet style crackdown, the 1984 attack, the 6102, the self-custody ban, like all these things that we need to be prepared for and we need to, insulate ourselves against. But I totally agree with you that there's not nearly enough focus on these kind of long drawn out attacks where they just slowly ratchet things down. And, you know, kind of the frog boiling the water type idea, to use a bit of a cliche, but yeah. And like these kinds of things, like, you know, there's obviously all this hash, you know, has come off the network. How much of that is now under the control of the CCP? Nobody knows. Is it a small number? Is it a huge number? Is it somewhere in between? Yeah, I don't think anybody, or maybe somebody does, but I certainly don't have a good read on that.
Yeah.
And we should operate under the assumption that it's a big number, you know, and then if that turns out to not be the case, then we'll be pleasantly surprised.
So, like, realistically, what would be a good way to protect yourself in a situation like that?
I mean, presumably what they would use it for is to do all kinds of fuckery and to, you know, cause turmoil on the Bitcoin network, to you know, cause people to mistrust, like all these different stuff. And so, you know, what I would do personally is take advantage of the price dip to buy as much as I can, and just leave the rest of it parked in cold storage, you know, with X number of blocks on top of it, you know, pretty well, you know, essentially completely insulated from any kind of fuckery that's going on with reorgs and things like that in the present. But that would be the most obvious attack vector, would be, you know, they acquired all this hash power that's offline right now, and then they're going to bring it online to, you know, to cause all kinds of mischief. But I'm sure there's tons of other more kind of nuanced ways they can fuck with stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. The CCP should not be underestimated.
No.
They're crazy. They try to reorg.
Yeah.
In order to destroy confidence in Bitcoin as a sound money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think this comes back to the idea, like, we have not won this war.
No.
And it's just barely starting.
Well, and this is another conversation I was having this week, was, you know, the people that, you know, think, oh, we can take these risks with BIP 300. Like, we can take these, like, it is absolutely not a layup that, you know, that Bitcoin topples world governments. Like, that's my best guess as far as how this plays out. And I think we've got a good shot, but it's not a done deal. It's not a lay. It's not like, you know, we can sit on our hands for the next decade and wake up to, you know, peace and love and harmony, some kind of anarchist utopia. And so, like, yeah, I mean, okay, anyway, that's what I was going to say. So the conversation I was having this week was just this idea that the people in power, because the same people have been in power, you know, for at least since the end of World War II. You know, it's this idea that you elect one person or that person and that actually matters. Like, no, we've had the same foreign policy since the end of World War II, which is go around the world killing children and blowing shit up. And so it's like this idea that those people have maintained power for many, many decades. And this idea that they're just going to roll over in the face of the most significant threat to their power that they've ever seen, that they're not going to get violent. They're not going to get authoritarian. They're not going to go Soviet. They're not going to, you know, they're not going to come up with every single way to fuck us that they can. That I think is terribly dangerous perspective. And like, another really good point I've heard is, you know, this idea that, like, they're not trying to necessarily stop and attack Bitcoin as much as they're trying to acquire Bitcoin for themselves. Like, they're gonna, you know, maybe they won't have a formal 6102 attack, but they'll have a way that they can, you know, physically or otherwise steal Bitcoin from people that hold it and then self-custody it and things like that. Like, I don't know, like, people, I think, need to take their personal security a lot more serious than most people do.
Yeah, there's this.
A 6102 attack would be difficult, but you could definitely seize miners. Consider that. Like, you could seize the means of new coins. I think that's overlooked often. So, like, the jurisdiction risk is significant, depending how far down the game theory you get.
Yeah. And like a 6102 attack, like, to be extremely effective in the short term, you know, doesn't need to get even 5% of people, you know, like, definitely some kind of low single digit number would be plenty to cause a lot of mischief in the short term. And it's one of those things where it's like, you know, do I think it's an existential threat to Bitcoin? No, I don't. But I think it could really hurt my friends and a lot of people that I care about. And, you know, that's kind of the angle that I come at it from, that it's not like, you know, like the idea that governments, you know, a lot of people ask me, let's say, you know, what do you know, is the government going to ban Bitcoin? And the way I always answer that is, that's like my 6-year-old growing up with Conor McGregor. You know, like the proper response is not fear. It's giving them a cute little pat on the head and kind of moving about your day. But, you know, but that's like the long-term perspective. I think in the short term, they can cause a lot of trouble. They can mess with on-ramps, off-ramps. Like there's a lot that they can do to screw over normal people and to benefit their friends, which is what historically they've done in the past.
Yeah, I think this is something that people need to be red pilled on, is this idea, and it's amazing to me. I don't know, I can't remember when my red pill moment was, when I saw the disconnect between, you know, what I was taught and what I was being told from, you know, what's actually happening. But it amazes me talking with people that, you know, are so bought into the idea that like somehow electing Trump or electing Biden would actually fix anything. And I'm the asshole that points out everything that they do wrong. Like, see, didn't fix anything. But yeah, I think that's a great perspective. Well,
about all I got.
Yeah. Thanks for everybody dropping in.
Yeah.
If you got any topics you want us to cover, you're welcome to join us in the Twitter Spaces next time, or shoot us a message on Twitter at Toxic Airwaves. And yeah,